Hey guys, Lindsay here from Saddle Up again. Today I'm at my barn and wanted to do some educational videos, specifically this one going over some saddle fitting myths just from a shop that is a very strict saddle fitter and we're very involved in the industry, as well as some signs to an ill-fitting saddle. So what may be going on, like not necessarily symptoms, but just signs that your horse might be telling you that something is wrong and they are uncomfortable. So I'm gonna saddle Disco up and we are gonna chat about it. Okay, so now that he is saddled and looking like a nice little background, let's start with some of the saddle fitting myths that we find either asked a lot in our shop from customers or just things that we come across more commonly that unfortunately is just not as cut and dry as it sounds. So first thing that I want to go over, which is the biggest thing that we hear, and I'm not trying to step on toes, I'm not trying to ruffle feathers, we are just trying to help educate and show a different perspective since we are so involved in the industry. So just want to throw that out there, take or leave this information. This is just stuff that point blank we have proven and we have found through the years of us being open, and we want to share it with the general public to help make a happier horse and a better ride for you guys. So first thing that we hear so much is people call or come into the store and they ask, well, do you have a semi-quarter horse bar or a full quarter horse bar? My horse needs a 7-inch full quarter horse bar or a 6.5 semi-quarter horse, whatever it may be. That is such a tricky statement. So the reason that it is near impossible to go off of terms like semi-quarter horse, full quarter horse bar, wide, extra wide, any of those, is it's not a standard measurement across the whole saddle making industry. So what does that mean? That means, for example, I like to compare it a lot to women's jeans. Ladies, when we go jean shopping, you can look at a size in Kimes jeans, but that size might not carry over to Ariats. And whatever size you wear in Ariats might not carry over to what you are in Sevens, or Miss Me's, or Cowgirl Tough, or all those jean companies out there. How many of us don't wear the same size in different brands? And it's normal, we're used to that. Same thing goes with these saddles, that is why. This, for instance, is a Circle Y high horse. This is a wide. This is specific to this saddle, not even to Circle Y, to this Galaxy barrel saddle model. This is not going to fit like a wide double J or a wide Scott Thomas just because it has the word wide in it. They are all individual and unique to this specific tree and this specific saddle model. So the same thing goes for all brands across the board. McCall, for instance, we do a lot with McCall saddlery. They do have a semi-quarter horse, a quarter horse, or a full quarter horse bar. That is specific to McCall's. That is not going to correlate with a different saddle maker that uses those terms because just like jeans, they are made completely unique and differently. For instance, this wide might have a 7-inch gullet, okay? But it doesn't have the same bar angle as another wide 7-inch gullet, or a back handhold gullet might be different, or the twist, or the rock, or the flare. The angles are really big. It's just not a standard measurement, so to completely solely go off of that is impossible. And it is frustrating because it's very advertised as such that, oh, you just need a semi-quarter horse. And that's a lot of times what we find customers do. They're like, hey, I was told I need a semi-quarter horse. Okay, well, that does not narrow it down enough because just like I was saying, there's so much more than just that front gullet, and we've covered that before. So we have some saddles that might be a 6.5 gullet, but they have a 90 or 90 to 93 degree bar angle, so they're wider than a 7-inch gullet in this other brand. So that is a huge saddle fit myth. You can listen to those terms, but ultimately that does not define what saddle you're gonna need that will fit your horse. It is a tiny portion of the whole saddle fitting game. If it was as simple as just saying like, yep, here's a semi-quarter horse bar, our lives would be so much easier. And I'm saying that jokingly, but not jokingly, because I can't even tell you how many hours we tirelessly work to fit one horse in one single appointment because it's not that easy. So saddle fit myth number one, the terms, they do not correlate with every single saddle brand, so therefore they are not going to narrow that down or help you choose the right saddle. It is all about this individual saddle that you are trying on your horse's back and how that fits. Doesn't matter the measurements, this individual saddle is going to be different. I have a whole trailer full of Circle Ys. I have this one in an extra wide tree. Same model, fits totally different than the other Circle Y high horse extra wide trees. I have an all around. They have since discontinued this model. Fits differently. It's a wide, but fits differently than all of their all arounds. So just food for thought. Just like jeans, saddles are completely different. If your saddle's pinching, just add a thicker pad. That's been the saying for literally centuries. However, the problem with that, and I'm gonna keep using analogies, if you have a pair of shoes that are too small, okay, and they're hurting your feet, they're tight, would your first thought be to put on an extra thick pair of socks or maybe 2 pairs of socks to relieve that pressure? No, that's gonna make your foot hurt worse, and it's gonna make your shoe way tighter if you do that. Essentially, that's the same thing that we're doing. If you have a pressure point and you're adding a thicker pad, that's just making that pressure point grow and just make it a bigger problem, truthfully. So a thicker pad sometimes might be something good that might help some things, but when it comes to fixing pressure points, absolutely in no way does that fix a tight saddle. It honestly makes it worse. Another analogy we like to use is the Princess and the Pea. If you guys aren't familiar with it, it's an old like fairy tale story where she can feel a little tiny pea. They stack mattresses and mattresses and mattresses like to the ceiling for her, and she can still feel that pea at the very bottom of all those mattresses. Even though it was so thick, she could still feel it at the very top. Same thing. So truthfully, we honestly like to recommend thinner pads. Obviously, it depends on discipline, and we've gone over that in our pad video, but thicker pad is not going to be the answer to fix tight spots or pressure points. Just want to throw that out there. Saddle fit myth number 2. Saddle fit myth number 3, and this is a big one, and this is going to cause a lot of controversy, so I want to say this in a very respectful way because I'm not trying to discount anybody, what they do or what they say. Sweat patterns. So sweat patterns, all I'm going to say about sweat patterns is, can they be a good tool in helping you diagnose if a saddle fits or not? Absolutely. Are they a true tell sign? No. And I'll tell you why. So we have done a lot of research with a thermo-imaging system. First of all, it is very hard to get your horse in certain seasons 100% soaking wet to get that perfect dry spot. So that's something you need to look at too. If it's a 40-degree day and you rode your horse and they're pretty dry, that doesn't mean that the saddle doesn't fit necessarily. It's just weather dependent sometimes too. I mean, there's days that I'll ride for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and my horse isn't even really sweaty because maybe it's a cooler day or we didn't really do that much. So that comes into effect too. However, when you have a dry spot, the ones that we get concerned about is when they are little itty bitty ones, circular ones, about the size of like a dime or a quarter, where they are usually like right here where this screw is. Typically they are going to be hotter when you touch that dry spot than the rest of the back. They are physically going to be like if someone went and that hot, that burn feeling, they're going to be hotter than the rest of the back because that is meaning that there's friction sitting there like this. So it's hot. Okay. The big dry spots that sometimes are a circle but they're larger, or maybe it's this whole area and just a few spots are wet, those do not always mean that your saddle doesn't fit. And the reason being is when we were messing with the thermal imaging, it actually can indicate, and I'm not going to say always, but it can indicate that your saddle actually fits very nicely. We're just getting ventilation and proper airflow through there, which is not a bad thing. When they are those bigger dry spots, feel them. A lot of the times they are either the same temperature as the rest of the back, which is a positive thing, or they're even cooler than the rest of the back instead of that zing hot like the little tiny ones. So that's just something to pay attention to. I'm not saying that they should be ignored by any means, but I feel like a lot of people will solely go off of sweat patterns when honestly, yes, can it say that the saddle doesn't fit? Absolutely, there are instances, but there are also instances that actually indicate that the saddle might be fitting fine and you just have good proper airflow. So something just to keep an eye on. Lastly, another saddle fitting myth that we see frequently with appointments and customers in our store. Saddle sores. We've all probably seen them. They're usually behind this shoulder area. They're usually big white patches of hair. They can be smaller, they can be large, but they're big old white marks, usually right behind the shoulders. They can be back in the loin or basically just wherever the saddle tree is sitting. You'll hear a lot of people say, oh no, those are fine. That just means I'm using them. I'm riding that horse. That's all that means. That just means they've had a good long day, a hard work, like they're fine. That doesn't indicate anything. It does. So what a white mark or a saddle sore means is wherever that mark is, the saddle was pinching them so drastically that it killed the hair follicles and the blood flow to those hair follicles. That's why they turn white, because there's no longer blood flow. It kills the pigment, it kills that hair follicle basically. So that is why they turn white instead of staying whatever color your horse is and staying that same color. It turns white because of that, because you've literally pinched the sweat glands off and you've damaged that hair follicle and the blood vessels. So it does not mean that you've just had a good long ride on that horse or that they're a working horse. That means that you have severely damaged that horse's back, and it is not a good thing. This one is not something that you hear much of anymore. I think people are kind of out of that, where they recognize it and they realize what it actually means instead of saying that it's just a good, that horse has been rode, that's all that means kind of thing. When in reality, it means that that horse was pinched so severely that their sweat glands, hair follicles, all of that is now damaged. And 9 times out of 10, it is more likely that that will never come back. There are some instances when it will grow back and change back the correct color, but 99.9% of the time that is going to stay white because those sweat glands are damaged. Okay, well now that we've kind of went over the top saddle fit myths that we hear in our store, I'm going to move on to some different signs that you might not even think are related to a horse showing you that their saddle doesn't fit or they're uncomfortable, but they're honestly very common ones that we see. And again, on the saddle fit myths, I am not trying to step on toes. I don't want to ruffle feathers. It's just food for thought, and I think it's important to keep an open mind in the industry. So just trying to educate, that's all we're doing. Same thing with this, with the behavioral issues. So first signs I want to talk about are behavioral issues. That's the most common, I would say, that we see. Normally, behavioral means something in your horse has changed. So either they are bucking, they are misbehaving, a lot of times pinning their ears. When you cinch up, they might be turning around and trying to bite you as you cinch up. They could be not wanting to go into different gaits. Like if you're trying to get them from a walk to a trot, they might pin their ears, they might shake their head, they might swish their tail, they might not want to go into the proper lead, they might throw their shoulder out. So if you are noticing any behavioral changes in your horse, whether it's over a long period of time or a short period of time, it does not hurt to check your saddle fit, because it absolutely can be linked to that. In not all cases, there could be something else going on, or honestly, it could just be their personality. That is very possible. However, if you notice your horse who had never done this before is doing any of those things, shaking their head, bucking, pinning their ears, reaching around, biting you, swishing their tail, kicking, pawing, anything just out of the ordinary on top of them, like while you're riding, or even just on the ground while you're saddling or when you bring the saddle out, it's just a good thing to check your saddle fit, because that is the 90% telltale sign, I would say, that we see on why customers come in asking if their saddle still fits. It's because of a behavioral change. Next, though, we are going to talk about physical signs, because there are physical signs too that, again, maybe your horse is very stoic, and we have a lot of stoic horses that aren't going to let you know if the saddle is causing them pain or discomfort, because that's just who they are. They're not going to make a peep. They're just going to keep doing the best that they can for you. And those are honestly the trickier ones, because you just don't know. So, some physical changes that you might see. You'd be surprised, but some lameness issues. We've had horses that appear lame, they're limping, they have a hitch, they're stumbling. I've had a client that she told me on her trail rides, her horse was physically going down to its knees and falling. And I said, I don't think that's saddle fit related. That's got to be something neuro or like some lameness issue that you're dealing with. And no, come to find out, it was because her saddle was pinching that horse that significantly in the shoulders that when she was trying to go up and down hill, it physically could not. So it was going down to his knees and falling. So it can definitely appear in things that you would think are maybe lameness issues, but aren't. They are linked back to your saddle. So watch for any of those, any tripping, falling, limping, anything like that, that you might think, man, this might be lameness, or it could be your saddle fit. So just something to check as far as that goes. Another physical thing, saddle sores, we talked about that. If you notice any bald spots or actual physical looking sores, like where it's been rubbed and it's irritated, that is a huge indicator, as well as if you start to see the white hairs appear, because a saddle mark like that, it doesn't appear overnight. It takes time to kill off those sweat glands. So it won't always appear right away. Honestly, it could take months. Usually we see it appear a lot from season to season. So like when they get their summer coat and shed their winter coat, or vice versa, they might appear. So that's something to watch for. Other things are going to be muscle atrophy. Muscle atrophy is huge. Body damage, that goes hand in hand with physical. If your horse is starting to look almost like, I joke about this, but it's not a joke, someone took a spoon or a melon baller and scooped out behind their shoulder blade, that means that your saddle is so tight on that horse that it has physically atrophied and diminished that muscle. And the odds of it getting rebuilt are very slim. So any sort of atrophy, swelling, bumps, anything of that sort, watch out for those, because those can also be signs that your saddle isn't fitting. And it can be anywhere along this whole tree. We have a lot of horses that they get almost like a hunter's bump, but on their loin, kind of back where the end of this tree bar stops, or they might get swelling up on the wither or on the spine. The biggest thing I will say is that we see is the atrophy or the diminished top line, where they have a hole behind their shoulder blade, or their top line is so diminished that, let's say this is the back, it looks like a table. It goes like this and then down because it has just diminished all that top line and that muscle. So if you are noticing any behavioral signs, physical signs, or body damage, definitely doesn't hurt to check your saddle fit, because you know you're going to do all the other things, vet, farrier, teeth, all that stuff, which is also valid and very good, but you might as well throw your saddle fit into that mix just to make sure, because what if that's the answer? Last thing to kind of check for is emotional damage. These animals, it's muscle memory to them. So if you start to notice your horse, let's say, you know, when you go to throw this saddle on, if they are spooking or trying to get away from you, pulling back, going to the side, or a lot of times we'll just see horses get super stiff. They just freeze. Sometimes they shake, they jump, they get petrified when you bring this saddle out. That is something to pay attention to and see what is causing that, especially when you're cinching it up. If they are getting anxious or upset when you're cinching that saddle up, that's something to look into. But huge on the emotional side too, because they don't forget that. And over time, the more consistent you use something like that, they remember. They remember how it feels at a walk, at a trot, at a lope, standing still when you put it on. If there's a pressure point, those horses know and they remember it. So the emotional damage can take a huge toll on them, and it can be a huge indicator, and it might take a while for them to express that. But sometimes horses get very vocal with their emotional trauma, basically, that they've had to deal with an ill-fitting saddle. So any changes like that, anything you notice, like I said, us as horse people, we go through the works always. If my horse sneezes wrong, I'm like, vet, farrier, teeth, saddle fit. Saddle fit should be in the equation of that, because it could it not be? Absolutely, it could be something else. But what if it was? What if it was something like that and you just didn't even think of it? So just paying attention, listening to your horse. So if you are noticing any trauma reactions, any emotional damage, physical damage, behavioral changes, anything of the sorts, check your saddle fit. Because if it's not, then great, you can move on, you can check that off. But what if it's the last thing that you ever thought of and you've never checked it and it was the problem the whole entire time? I'm not saying it's an easy problem to fix by any means, but at least you would know. Big thing that I can't stress enough is listen to your horse, pay attention to your horse. Are some of them quirky and weird, and that's just them? Absolutely, but what if there is something causing it? Just food for thought. Again, we are not trying to discount anybody. We are not trying to ruffle feathers, cause drama, or any of the sorts. All we are trying to do is hopefully maybe make a difference for a rider or a horse out there that is open-minded and wants to learn about new things. And our biggest thing is we just want to educate people so that we can have happier horses and better rides, because at the end of the day, we want to enjoy these animals, so they need to enjoy it as well. As always, we really appreciate you watching. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything that you would like to leave us below, please comment, subscribe to our channel. We are always happy to take video requests also, or if you would like any help, you're welcome to give our store a call. We have countless of success stories or stories that we can tell you, kind of going over the things that I went over today. Different signs, different situations that you may not even think are a saddle fit problem, but are essentially linked back to that. So let us know how we can help. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel, leave us a comment, and thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.